Hello and welcome to The Road to Autonomy. I'm your host, Grayson Brulte. The Road to Autonomy is brought to you in part by Stantec Generation AV. Stantec Generation AV combines some of the most experienced AV experts in the industry with the resources of a global engineering firm. Stantec Generation AV provides education, consulting, assessment, and guidance to any industry interested in autonomous vehicles. Learn more at stantec.com. Hello and welcome to The Road to Autonomy. I'm your host, Grayson Brulte. On today's episode, we're absolutely honored to welcome back Cheng Lu, President and CEO of TuSimple. Cheng, welcome back to The Road to Autonomy.
Hi, Grayson. Thanks for having me back.
Well, welcome to have you back. This is wonderful. First time you came on was to discuss the successful IPO of TuSimple, and you went the traditional route. And now you're back to talk about Driver Out. You've done 2 major milestones in under 12 months. What are your reflections on the last 12 months? Because you've accomplished a lot.
I think at TuSimple, we pride ourselves on being strategic, thoughtful, and pragmatic. And we started with the traditional IPO, as we talked about last time. We had the opportunity, of course, to take the SPAC route like many other players out there. We knew that a traditional IPO is what gives the most credibility, transparency. And so we want to do it the right way. And I think that's proven to be the case, given how, of course, I think more and more companies that have been SPAC'd, not to say SPAC is a negative thing, just that sometimes the companies are maybe premature in terms of development as a public company. We also know that it's super important, regardless if you do traditional IPO or SPAC route, to demonstrate credibility. You have to earn credibility. It's not something that's given. Driver Out is one of our big milestones we have for 2021. It's clearly a critical path to commercialization. For us to achieve that really is getting credibility. And I think that way, as we share with our investors and shareholders of the additional milestones coming up, we do hope that resonates, right? And people can look at our track record, pre-IPO and post-IPO thus far, of us hitting the milestones that we set out to achieve.
You could summarize it this way. Driver Out was credibility delivered. It was in the IPO prospectus. You've talked about it on previous earnings calls that the company was working towards Driver Out. You delivered that. There was even a research note, I believe it was Morgan Stanley, that came out and said TuSimple delivered on its promise of Driver Out. As CEO of a publicly traded company, is that one of your things? You have to focus on safety, you have to focus on redundancy of system, but you also have to focus on honoring and keeping your commitments that you make?
That's right. I mean, at TuSimple, we have a really history of being industry first, hitting the milestones that we set out to achieve. And that's not going to stop just because we're public, right? In fact, that can't stop. And this always goes back to autonomous driving. Everyone knows is a massive industry. The disruption, the potential is humongous. And well, at the same time, the challenge is that this is a long development cycle. It's a very long development cycle. No different than electric vehicles was 5 years ago or 10 years ago. And so along the way, we have to have milestones that are in the path of commercialization. We have to be clear and be visible about those milestones, and we have to achieve them in time. And I think that's also important from a stock perspective, just having additional catalyst for the stock. So absolutely, I mean, it's something that we'll continue to do in terms of hitting our milestones.
On December 21st, 2021, TuSimple delivered that milestone. Became the first company in history to operate a Class 8 semi-truck on public roads without a human in the vehicle and without human intervention. Milestone was delivered. How did you achieve this monumental accomplishment? And also on the backside of that, how did you put out the safety framework, incorporate safety and most important, redundancy into the system in order to achieve that accomplishment?
We accomplished this, we achieved this. It was really like the accumulation of all of our commercial engineering efforts, primarily engineering efforts, of course, over the last 6 years since our founding. Take a look back in 2018, we actually demonstrated our first hub-to-hub driver-in operations. So even if you trace all the way back, there was a YouTube video, 60-mile long autonomous driving operations from terminal to terminal in heavy rain. So in 2018, we had many of the features already complete to do a driver out operations. The last 3.5 years, we were singularly focused on improving those features. So getting to feature completion, because if you remove the driver, you can't not be feature complete. right? Like you can't have certain parts of your commercial route the system can't handle by itself. I mean, that you can't remove the driver. And you definitely cannot remove it on multiple occasions. The second part is we're working with prototype hardware. It's a retrofit, it's an upfitted vehicle today that we're working with. And so there's actually an additional layer of difficulty in making the hardware and the system redundant. And that's important because the difference between level 4 and level 2 is that the human is no longer last line defense, right? The system has to understand all of the different faults that can happen and have a mitigation for all of the faults. And that's extremely difficult. That all has to tie into a robust safety case, which we publish online. That's only the first 30 pages of a very long document that has the support. We didn't publish the supporting documents because a lot of that was proprietary IP. And the last part is overall the system has to be fail safe in the sense that we know that faults will happen and could happen. And so the system has to be able to, by itself, safely pull over to the side of the street or come to a rolling stop on the highway in order to be safe. So, I mean, those are all the things that we worked on the last 3 years to get to driver out.
Fail-safe approach creates safe roads for perhaps it's the mom taking a daughter home from a play date or a dad taking a son out to a movie. That's creating safe roads with a fail-safe approach. And that's the benefits of redundancy. And all systems have to have redundancy. And you clearly demonstrate that. And along with your peers in the industry are very focused on safety and redundancy. You mentioned going back to the early when TuSimple went hub to hub. Why was hub to hub so important early on for TuSimple, where some of your competitors in the industry are focused on, let's call it middle mile, not necessarily going to hub? Was that the fact that TuSimple was aiming to go driver out in order to properly deliver and meet the expectation of your customers to go hub to hub? Is that why it started, or was there another reason why TuSimple said, okay, we're going to go hub to hub?
There's two reasons. The first is ultimately we're bringing a commercial solution to the market that has to be able to provide the most value proposition to the customers. And the customers of the freight market are shippers and carriers. And for them, it's important to have a hub-to-hub solution, especially larger ones, because we're in an economy, we're in a trend where on-demand economy is the future, right? It's now, but also going to be more and more of the future. Supply chain is already very tight. Carriers and shippers have to tighten their supply chain in order to deliver goods the same day or next day rather than a week from now. And so if you're not hub to hub, then that means that the customers have to incur additional drayage costs. Some could be as far as an hour or 45 minutes, right? And of course that makes the supply chain just not efficient and doesn't provide them with a good service. So that's point number one, is we are very focused on providing the best solution to our partners and customers. Point number two is our technology. We started focus on trucks. We started with computer vision as the backbone because we know that the trucks have to be able to have a longer perception range because one, they're driving at higher speeds, they have to see further to be safe. At the same time, they're also, if you want to do surface streets, to make protected left-hand turns, to make difficult maneuvers, the trucks take much longer time than the passenger car. And again, that goes back to having a long-range perception system that's backed by camera perception. So the technology that we have also allowed us to provide this solution. And so to us, it was a very obvious choice to offer a hub-to-hub technology.
Thank you for bringing up the cameras. There was a FreightWaves article a while back, and I believe the term that Jim Adler used was a swarm of vehicles that surrounded the TuSimple truck it was going to turn into Tucson. And the truck came to a nice stop, and then as a human, you couldn't see this vehicle coming. I think it was a Jeep, or it could have been a large SUV, comes flying, but the cameras picked it up and stopped and saved that person's life, because if it was a human, you wouldn't have seen it, and that person could have crashed in the truck. That's, I want to point out, is a huge benefit of the perception system, because you can see all the way around the vehicle. And you're spot on about the supply chain. I'll give you a personal story. I ordered a new coffee maker 14 days ago. It still hasn't shipped. It's not available to ship. It's a coffee maker. It's nothing fancy, just to make coffee, because we are facing a supply chain crunch, and now I'm looking for another brand. So you bring up two valid points. Now, TuSimple is operating driver out in Arizona. You had the press release comes out, and then all suddenly on February 2nd, 2022, the company announces it's completed over 550 miles of autonomous driver out. And it's in real world conditions, no human in the vehicle, no teleoperation, no traffic intervention. I said, okay, we went from 90 miles to 550 miles. Me being me, I'm like, okay, somebody's scaling here. Is this the first phase of driver out scaling?
That's right. For us, driver out, it was never intended, and we communicate this, it's never intended to be a demo or a flashy PR. This is a critical path to commercialization. Scaling, you hit the word, you hit the nail on the head, really is the key word. So the biggest challenge that I think as an investor, as a partner, as someone that's interested in this industry, the biggest challenge is understanding how far along are we? What's the end post and what's the end line? And so as an industry, really no one's been able to articulate where we are in terms of development and give investors, partners, observers a sense of comfort or confidence. And so with driver out, to be able to conduct it multiple times, it goes back to we are feature complete. Again, you cannot do driver out operations at 80 miles over and over again without being able to mitigate basically all the edge cases or contain and mitigate all the edge cases that you see on the road. The second part is, okay, what happens next? Right? We all know it seems like a big deal. It looks like a big deal, but what does that mean? And what this means is now we can have a linear scale to commercialization. And commercialization to us, at TuSimple, we're here to enable low cost, reliable, safe freight capacity. Shippers care about cost and level of service. And so to commercialize, one, you have to provide enough uptime or level of service to the shipper. So there has to be multiple routes, right, where they have demand for it. And the second part of commercialization is the cost of operations has to be comparable or lower than that of human driver. Otherwise, why would they use this technology? So driver out being the first driver out run, it was at nighttime. It will demonstrate that over the next 2 years, we're scaling the ODD, so daytime, new routes, right? So again, these are things that we can show you and as part of our commercialization over the next coming month and so forth. We can also show that we will show that the cost of operations is coming down. Today, we put different safety precautions around our driver out tests, like a chase vehicle, a survey. Those will come off, right? Because again, you can't have those if you want to have lower cost and scalable solutions. So scale is the key word. And now it's clear what does commercialization mean. And everything starting from driver out in sequence, we can show you there's no unknown unknowns and that this is a clear path to scaling and commercializing.
So just to summarize, as you said, there will be announcements coming in the future with new routes and daytime operations. Was that a correct statement?
I mean, those are on our roadmap. So this driver out run was done anywhere from 8 p.m. to midnight. And we actually did back-to-back runs on certain nights. So that was nighttime, which actually is more challenging in the sense of the perception we need to do. But also, of course, trucks also need to run during daytime. So that's something that we can show you that these trucks, next time in the future, the driver out runs will be done at day. It's important to kind of show a clear bridge between this initial phase of driver out and then how that links in sequence to commercializing at scale.
I'm going to put my economist here on for a minute. So I look at commercialization and I look at the data that's been released recently by the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. And they said the annual inflation rate for overall trucking cost is 17%. I repeat, 17%. And then for long-haul trucking sector, the annual inflation rate is 25%. These are real numbers that are going to have an incredible impact on the margin, and trucking companies are going to be forced to raise rates. With the out-of-control inflation, TuSimple going driver out, is this kind of saying TuSimple, because of the driver out technology, will be able to lower inflation for your customers, can be able to give the goods to their customers at a lower cost? Is inflation kind of benefiting you from that perspective of where you're building the technology?
100%. Our mission is to lower the cost of freight transportation. And today we talk to our shippers and carrier partners. Our direct labor costs is increasing, I think 30% last year to some extent. Retaining drivers is more and more difficult. And it's not only just drivers. I mean, as a whole, as a country, I was looking at some statistics. It's staggering the number of people that left the workforce because of the pandemic. I think there was one number that says there's 3 million early retirements, and those people are not coming back to the workforce. So really, the labor shortage today is not even just on the driver population. You're seeing this across the board, right? I mean, from building homes to manufacturing to service industries. So that's not going to get that much better. Fuel, which is 30% of the cost of on a per mile basis, that's increasing now. Of course, fuel price is volatile, but man, I just fuel my car and it's close to $100. This time it hurts. So all these things are driving cost, and transportation cost is actually a pretty big part of that gets passed to the consumers, right? So of course, this is an additional tailwind to why the technology we're developing is so critical.
We just recently had the Super Bowl, and the average Super Bowl party cost 12% more due to inflation. That's chips, soda, nachos, hamburgers, hot dogs. And if you went high end, you went steak, it's a 25% increase. Those are real numbers that are affecting your average American. And then we have the driver shortage. And on February 3rd, 2022 op-ed, former Labor and Transportation Secretary Elaine Chao, she stated the following: autonomous trucking technology is increasingly seeing greater acceptance as it offers the great potential to boost safety, save fuel, cut emissions, and help solve truck driver shortages. Secretary Chao is spot on. It seems that the former Secretary of Transportation's endorsing the TuSimple model of autonomous trucking. This is a major, major milestone. Do you see the acceptance of autonomous trucking grow as TuSimple safely scales the driver out program and expands into more states and continues to build onto the AFN network?
Yeah, we do. As we do more driver out operations, I think this idea of having autonomous vehicles on the road becomes more and more normalized. It's on us to be very safe. Of course, that's our first priority, and to really communicate what that means. I think driver out or autonomous trucks, if you think about what technology out there can fundamentally create new freight capacity, it has to be autonomous vehicles. And that's our singular focus.
Has to be autonomous vehicles. I love that line. I'll go one further, Cheng, and say it has to be autonomous trucks. We'll go that way. And it's not just you as the president and CEO of TuSimple saying this. It's not just the former Secretary of Transportation, Secretary Chao. There's a real world partnership with an iconic brand, Union Pacific. I love Union Pacific. I had Lionel trains growing up. I'm a big train guy. And part of the February 2nd announcement around Driver Out, Kenny Rocker, Executive Vice President, Marketing and Sales at Union Pacific, stated the following: partnering with TuSimple allows us to extend our operations beyond our rail hubs and serve our customers faster and more efficiently. This groundbreaking autonomous driving technology and our partnership provides us with a significant opportunity to scale the technology in our network, proactively reducing global supply chain congestion. Could you please kindly talk about the partnership between TuSimple and Union Pacific?
I love trains too. All of us growing up are fascinated by trains for sure. Actually, it's really cool. I have a sort of opportunity to ride in their train over extended amount of time coming up. So I'm very excited about that.
Now that's awesome. Do you get the conductor hat? I have to know. Do you get the whole?
Probably don't have the training for that yet, but that is a personal goal of mine. I think certainly Union Pacific is the largest transportation company in North America. And I think as TuSimple, we're very honored to be able to collaborate with them and to help expand their business. If you look at a train compared to traditional trucking today, a train's benefit are, of course, is lower cost. It's better for the environment on a per ton basis, per mile basis. But then the challenges that traditional train network has is it's not as flexible, right? Because you have to bring it to a big rail yard. Oftentimes, the waiting time is a little bit longer. And so if you could mix autonomy into their supply chain and to their network, it could add a lot more flexibility to their network. It can also help them expand the reach their network that today their train tracks just doesn't get to. It's very expensive now to build any new railroad tracks. And so if you can leverage autonomy for that, that's for them significant.
It's maximizing the potential of the railroad. It's maximizing the potential to shore up the supply chain. So I get thinking, so here you are, you mix in autonomy with Union Pacific. You got to go back to the winter of 1936. Union Pacific is a passenger rail at that time, and they decide to mix in resorts with the opening of the Sun Valley, which was developed and owned by Union Pacific until 1964. The Union Pacific chairman at the time, Oliver Harriman, he developed the idea to package a destination with passenger service, very similar today, where Union Pacific will package autonomous trucking with the delivery of freight. In order to make that happen, Mr. Harriman, he brought Clark Gable from Gone with the Wind. He brings out Clark Gable in the media, and Clark Gable skiing. Everybody's got to go to Sun Valley. Okay, that's what it was known for now. Now it's known for the Sun Valley Conference. Fast forward 88 years. Is the packaging of rail and autonomous trucking the next Sun Valley moment?
That's a big thing to live up to. But I think a word that we use internally is autonomous trucking could be intermodal 2.0, right? It's a complement to an existing intermodal. And ultimately, what customers care about is getting their goods delivered on time in a short amount of time at lower cost. And so really kind of blending in autonomous trucking with the rail, with manual driven trucks, I mean, that will make the supply chain more efficient. So certainly it's a very interesting thing about what the potential holds.
But the potential holds the way that Sun Valley held financially for Union Pacific, I would say you're in very good shape there. So how did the relationship between Union Pacific and TuSimple begin? Was it Mr. Fritz that called you? For our listeners, he's the chairman and CEO of Union Pacific, and say, "Hi, I have an idea. Mr. Lu, can we have a conversation?" Is that how it began, or how did it go?
Like any good partnership happens over time. As two sides build trust, build collaboration. And Union Pacific was a strategic investor in TuSimple back in 2020. So we worked with Union Pacific team for some time, even prior to IPO. And so I think this is a next evolution of our collaboration. And I think for us, it's really important. We have these great partners. We all have the same mentality that we want to build something great. We want to make the supply chain more efficient. They understand, as a railroad, they really understand what a network means, what it means to have an ecosystem around that network. That's very much our philosophy. So I think from a technology standpoint, we show maturity. From a philosophical standpoint, I think we're aligned, and that leads to good things.
It's a forward-looking statement on my behalf. I'm really excited to see where this partnership with Union Pacific goes and how it's going to help benefit the American consumer when their cost of goods is lower because of efficiency in the supply chain. TuSimple today, companies grow and been public barely a year, got over 11,000 unique map miles in the company's autonomous freight network, which we covered in the previous podcast. A recent expansion to Texas, complete with the Hillwood partnership, which is the Perot family. Will the Driver Out program be expanding to Texas as well? As the Perot-Hillwood relationships there, the miles are getting mapped. Will Driver Out now scale to Texas as well?
Well, we have more announcements, more to talk about that coming up. I think we have our quarterly earnings call, and we also have analyst days coming up. So I think there's more things we'll share. But as I mentioned earlier, on the path to commercialization, the key word is scale. And we have to be able to scale the number of routes that we have. And so that is something that's in our roadmap.
When those partnerships or statements are made public, we'd love to have you back on to talk about them at that time. And are there new potential Driver Out customers and partners looking to come online? They see the press, they see the YouTube videos, they go, "Oh, wait a second, we want to be a part of this." Has the phone been ringing off the hook where you got to put water on it like an old Warner Brothers cartoon because it won't stop ringing?
Certainly the demand for truck capacity, for reliable, safe, low-cost freight, it's there. And it's getting more and more severe with the driver shortage, with the fuel costs and so forth. So demand hasn't been a problem. But certainly we have partners that want to do more in this space. Yeah, so hopefully you'll hear more these similar announcements coming up.
Oh, fantastic. And you've been quoted as talking about the demand being driven by the driver shortage. I agree with you. We can point to statistics from the government, from independent analysts. You're right on that. What are the economic benefits of Driver Out in the AFN network?
The economic benefits, it's very clear in the sense that today, if you look at the operating cost of a truck, 50% of the cost is direct labor, 30% of the cost is fuel, 10% or so, a little bit is like maintenance and insurance. Across these large cost buckets, autonomous driving can reduce all those costs. Now, of course, there'll be some additional costs of operating a network and so forth, but it's clear that on a per mile basis, autonomous trucking has potential to be lower cost than what's currently available in the market.
And not only reduce costs, won't it have a positive environmental impact as well?
TuSimple, we're the only company that has empirical data with one of the largest partners, UPS, that demonstrated our fuel savings efficiency. Not only that, we also had a year-long study with a major university to demonstrate this. So we can have about a 10%, I think with UPS, the empirical data is about 12%, 13% fuel efficiency, especially on highway driving. And that is huge. Fuel is 30% of the cost. Trucking, Class 8 heavy-duty trucking, I think is about 20% of all the greenhouse emissions in the transportation industry. And I don't know the exact numbers, but the transportation industry accounts for a pretty big part of greenhouse emissions globally. So I think like you said, the environmental aspect of it oftentimes is overlooked just because, of course, there's the self-driving aspect, but it really does have a big impact.
It's the greenhouse gas emissions are significant. There's an MIT study, I don't remember off the top of my head, that went into great detail about that. The numbers were frankly alarming. And whether the industry is doing good to help reduce the greenhouse emissions to make the planet a better place for our children and our children's children. So I'm a listener. I'm sitting here, Cheng, and I'm like, wow, this is really interesting conversation, but I'm still curious about driver out and what's next. How would you summarize the program for a listener who says, okay, this is really cool, but I'm still curious?
I think to summarize, this is from after driver out, we can in confidence say that we are future complete in terms of what it means to build autonomy, right? Because one of the biggest questions that many observers in the industry have is, this seems like a very difficult thing, right? Can you do it? Is it even possible to build an autonomous system that can operate a Class 8 vehicle? And so I think this gives a lot of confidence that we have, and we're future complete. Now, of course, we'll continue to optimize features, but there are no unknown unknowns that we haven't solved to solve our commercial use case. Now, we're not talking about driving in dense urban cities. We're just talking about point-to-point, terminal-to-terminal commercial operations, which is really what's required to solve the supply chain issue. The second part, as I defined, to commercialize is really having multiple routes in high-dense freight volume areas like Texas Triangle. It's to have a clear line of sight that the cost of autonomous operations on a per mile basis is lower than that of a manual truck. And now that is the end post. And we'll be able to show you clearly that we can scale to get to the end post. And so I think that's really the biggest takeaway is that nobody today can articulate or demonstrate where they are in their development and how close they are to the end line. And we have. And we'll continue to have more proof points as we march towards a commercialization.
That's a powerful statement. And as you commercialize the technology, the U.S. consumer wins at the end of the day because the potential for their goods to get there cheaper, safely, and faster, all the ingredients are there. And I'll be very frank, we need autonomous trucking for the U.S. economy because we have to shore up a supply chain. And what TuSimple's doing is helping us achieve that for the benefit of the consumer. And putting this all together, in your opinion, what does the future of autonomous trucking look like?
The future of autonomous trucking, well, we know the value. And really is how does this roll out? When does it commercialize? When does it really scale? For us, we believe that it's a linear scaling in the sense that really we're not only automating the truck, we're automating freight lanes. So you see more and more freight lanes getting automated. But the nice thing about autonomous trucking is that we can pick and choose the freight lanes. Right? We'll pick the most high density ones, the ones that are safer. So for instance, let's avoid school zones in the very beginning. And that's all doable. As we have our production programs with our OEM partner, Traton, Navistar, that's going to really enable to have more trucks built at scale onto our autonomous freight network that will allow third-party, UPS and others to purchase these trucks and to operate within our autonomous freight network. And that's how you get more density onto the network. So I think the nice thing about autonomous trucking is that we can have a commercially viable solution up and running that is generating significant revenue for TuSimple quite fast, and then have a scaled approach into automating more and more lanes until we get nationwide coverage.
Scaling's the key. You've clearly talked about that throughout this podcast. And if we scale, everybody wins and the environment wins. And when I take my daughter surfing in the ocean, hopefully the water continues to get cleaner when we reduce pollution. So thank you for that from a personal perspective. And Cheng, as we look to wrap up this insightful conversation, what would you like our listeners to take away with them?
I think we cover a lot today. At TuSimple, we are laser focused We have great technology and we're very pragmatic about how to bring that to market. So we'll continue to do that. Right now, we're firing on all cylinders. If anything, we actually announced that initially the driver out was a pilot program, a 1 to 2 month pilot program. And now we're actually going to extend it permanently as part of our operation. So we'll have continuous driver out operation. So really, again, another testament to our confidence in our technology development.
That's a huge, huge statement, making driver out permanent part of the TuSimple operations. And to me, that just says the future is bright, the future is autonomous, and the future is driver out. Cheng, thank you so much for coming back on the road to autonomy. And we can't wait to welcome you back again as TuSimple has new news and announcements to share with the public.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Road to Autonomy podcast. If you've enjoyed listening, please rate, review, and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. Want to get in touch? Follow us on Twitter at Road to Autonomy or email podcast@brulteco.com. The Road to Autonomy is produced by Brulte & Company. The views and opinions expressed on the Road to Autonomy podcast do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of Brulte & Company. The content discussed in this podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be taken as legal, tax, investment, or business advice.